Hi, Maxine. Okay. Need to do this. No. Okay. Okay. So good morning, everybody. So we're going to discuss Untane Tokef today. But before that, I don't know. It's something that bothers me. I think that there's not enough um, highlight on Yom Yerushalayim coming up Thursday, right? Thursday night and Friday. Um, I understand we live here in America, but the problem is that also in Israel, there's not enough.
Even in Israel.
Yeah. So,
Yerushalayim.
no, in Yerushalayim, actually, I think people celebrate it, but I think outside of Yerushalayim, not enough.
Well,
And
so,
they're off. They're off on Friday anyway. So I thought maybe we should spend a couple of minutes, just like some thoughts that I have about, let's call it like a mini shiur about Yerushalayim. Um, First of all, Yom Yerushalayim, everybody, I don't know if everybody, but we know the 28th of Iyar is the day in which we celebrate, commemorate the reunification of Yerushalayim after the Six-Day War in 1967. I don't want to go to all the history and that kind of stuff. I want to delve into that from, I don't know, maybe look a little bit theological, biblical perspective. Biblical? 1967. But Yerushalayim was there before. So let's delve into that a little bit. Okay? So if we look through the Torah, Yerushalayim is not mentioned in the Torah at all, not by name. Okay? And the connection to Am Yisrael is something that progresses over time. So first of all, we see that as Ir Shalem. The story, if you remember, after the First World War, the 4 against the 5 kings, Abraham goes and fights in that battle to release Lot, his nephew, and Melchizedek, Melech Shalem. Melchizedek, he is the king of that place called Shalem. That's the first time we see that that place. Later on, Chazal tell us that that is Yerushalayim. And actually, there's a midrash that says that Abraham called the place Har Hashem Yira'eh, okay, the mountain where God appears, and because of also honoring Melchizedek, he is the king of Shalem. So therefore, the word became Yerushalayim, Yera'eh and Shalem. So Yerushalayim, and this is how it became. Okay, that's the midrash. We know the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. It's called Har HaMoriah. Okay, it's not called Yerushalayim. Only later on, the rabbis make that connection. And only in the book of Chronicles, we actually see a connection between Har HaMoriah and Ir Shalem and all those places as identified as Yerushalayim. Okay, after Sefer Bereshit, we see that in the book of Joshua. The book of Joshua, again, we have it. We meet Adoni Tzedek. Adoni Tzedek, he is the king of Yerushalayim at the time of Yeshua. But again, it's not the capital of Israel. It's not even ours.
why does he have a name?
Today's Hebrew name. Back then, I'm not so sure it was. And we know that that eventually Yerushalayim was the place where King David established the kingdom, and he and he makes it into the capital of Yehuda. But specifically zooming on the old city or Har HaBayit, Temple Mount, that story appears in the last chapter of the book of Samuel. Okay? So let's go back and understand that story for a second. Establishing Yerushalayim as a spiritual center begins with a sin of King David. What happened? Towards the end of the book of Shmuel, we read that King David wants to count the army. He wants to know how big, how strong is the army. Yoav, his Ministry of Defense, says to him, bad idea. Don't do that. We already know from the Torah that there's a problem in counting Jews. You're not supposed to. Right? So we do all those tricks, whatever, when you count for a minyan or Shia Tamecha, all sorts of stuff, whatever. The Torah talks about you give a half shekel, whatever that is. However, King David decides to do that. And when he receives the numbers, it takes them a couple of months to do that census. I think like 9 months, 8 months, something like that. He basically, the numbers from what we understand is 1,000,003. It's a huge army. He talks about like 800 soldiers plus another 500 that are like whatever
Support staff.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's like 800,000. Yeah, 800,000 from Yehuda plus 500,000 from Israel, basically. The other way around. 500 from Yehuda. Anyway,
More than today.
more than it's 1,000,003, just army. Okay. Yoav understand that this is a bad idea because throughout the Torah, and not only throughout the Torah, also later on, if you look at the stories in the book of Yehoshua, when he was fighting in order to conquer the land, it's always the same message. It's not about the numbers. It's about a spiritual state. It's about connection to God. It's about the morality. If you think about battles of the eye and places like that, at the end of the day, they were able to conquer with very few warriors, with very small army, because they were connected and stuff like that. So Hanukkah happens much later.
Right, but it's also because.
But they had to, but when you think of something, you go back. You don't go into the future. You need to have perspective. Anyway, so because it's from a religious, let's call it theological perspective, it's problematic. And it's because the history shows that it's not about the size of the army, but rather it has to do with God. The Ralbag actually clarifies that, and he really sharpened that point. And he says that the sin of David was, he calls it Sam Basar Zro'o. That means he wanted to feel good. He wanted to I have like 1,000,003 words, that means what? No, it's not only that. I can lose or win in the war based on my army.
Hashem has nothing to do.
Exactly. That's the problem. It's not the size of the army, it's God. If God decides even a small army will defeat the enemy. And if God doesn't want it, even the largest army is not going to help you. And Yoav identifies that problem, and this is why he says to David, don't do that. However, he does. Okay. So what happens? Like every not every, but many times, immediately after the sin, the prophet comes. And again, Gad Hanavi, God the prophet, the same guy that comes to him after he sins with Bathsheba, comes to him and he says to him, we have a problem.
We got a problem.
And David immediately acknowledges. And what God Hanavi tells him, you have three options for a punishment. One is hunger, war, or a plague. A plague.
Plague.
Yeah.
Plague.
These are the three. I'm giving, because you recognize it, I'm giving you a choice. But we're gonna be punished in one of those three. And David understands what is going on here, and therefore he acknowledges the plague. Because again, war is about me, it's about my efforts. And that was the entire sin. Recognize, like, it's right. And the same for hunger. I can deal with that. The economy is in my I can control it. I can buy, I cannot buy, I can do taxes, I can do all sorts of stuff to try to fight it. Plague, it's not like today. Back then, all you can do is stay at home and pray. No vaccines, no nothing. Okay, right? It's the principle is it's showing that it's God, that it all comes from God.
Why did Hashem give him punishment that he himself would be affected, not everybody else?
Because unfortunately, when the leader sins, it impacts everybody. It affects everybody. That's the way it is. Anyway, David, when he chooses that, he says a very famous pasuk that we say every day. That's the opening for the Nefilat Apayim that we say, Niplana be'ad Hashem u'be'ad Adam alepola. I understand that the whole problem is because I didn't rely on God, so I prefer to be punished by something that is only from God and not to have any yeah. And that's what happens, and the plague goes on. I think 70,000 people die in that plague, and the plague stops because again he calls the Gad Hanavi, and in that particular place, which is, we're gonna know that it's Temple Mount. Back then it was not. And David says, I can't take it anymore. The people are dying. You want to punish me personally and my family? Go for it. But spare the rest of the people. And that particular place, geographically, that particular place is the Goren of Aravna, the Jebusite. Aravna was a Jebusite. He was the guy, Yebusi, that lived there. That was his property. And what happens is that Natan says to him, okay, fine. It's over. I understand you learned your lesson. So David wants to build an altar, and he wants to, bring sacrifices. And Aravna, the place that in that particular place, says to him, "Take it. It's a tremendous honor for me that the king of Israel will take that property and my sheep and whatever, and do it." And David realizes that it's his hubris. It's his own power that got him into trouble in the first place, and therefore he says, "No, I'm going to pay. I don't want to, I'm going to pay." There's a whole thing. Somebody, I think Mary was with me like a couple of years ago. We had a series about parallel stories. So I spoke about this incident that David insists to pay for that, just like Abraham insists to pay Marat HaMachpelah. Anyway, so he buys it and he builds the altar and he brings sacrifices. So that particular place, the place where eventually the temple was built in that location, is the place where the plague stopped.
Was he allowed to do that if they had Shiloh?
Yeah.
Because I thought they weren't supposed to have Bamot in other places.
No, they had Bamot all over until Beit HaMikdash.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay, so then the what?
If they're from other places.
No, but this is the particular location where the plague stops, and he realized it has symbolism, and he wanted to express his gratitude at that particular place. Now, let's think about it from a philosophical point of view for a second. So the temple can be built only where man kind of diminishes their power. When I make room for the Shekhinah, and I kind of expresses that it's not kochi ve'otzim yadi, it's not all about me, it's not my strength, etc. Then we can, Shekhinah can, the divine presence can rest, and we can have the temple. So from that kind of symbolic. Now, let's jump into 1967 because we need to connect it somehow to Yom Yerushalayim. What are we celebrating? On one hand, it's the military victory, right? Something that the world has never seen, even like something brilliant and okay. But the spiritual element of Yerushalayim is being modest. It's not about me. It's justice. The city represents justice. Think about the kings. We know about three kings: Malki Tzedek, the king of Tzedek, justice; Adoni Tzedek, the master of Tzedek, justice; and the last king that was in Yerushalayim is Tzidkiyahu. So that city represents justice, and we talk about it many times. Justice in Jewish perspective is not like in the court of law. Justice has inside it, wrapped inside it, it's also tzedakah, it's kindness. It's the two things that sometimes seem contradict each other. They have to be together in the Jewish perspective. So the spiritual meaning of the day is humbleness, justice, kindness, belief that in God that makes room for the other. It's not about me. On the other hand, so we celebrate Yerushalayim, which that's what Yerushalayim represents. But on the other hand, we also we celebrate the military victory, which is us. We're strong. We're like, we did like the whole thing.
But we only really won that war the way it was won. Hashem was with us.
Okay, so number one,
it was a miracle.
exactly. So number one, to reconcile that and to be able to put together the two is to understand that miracle was because of divine intervention. That's number one. That's number one. But on a practical level, for us in 2026, how can we celebrate that? What does it mean for us to celebrate that? And for me, I was playing with those two elements. There's only one solution, the way I see it. Bingo. Hallel, the recitation of Hallel on Yom Yerushalayim is the only thing that, so I'm celebrating, right? Because the victory, but how do I celebrate is by praising God. Yeah. So perhaps there's a lesson here that also, if we want to be in Yerushalayim, if we want to have Yerushalayim, we need to understand that it's not about military power. It's about ethics, morality, justice, kindness, all those values that that's the prerequisite to have Yerushalayim. And that's what we need to understand if we want to make sure that we stay in that city. That is Yom Yerushalayim thoughts. Now, I'm gonna go to.
So why don't other cities celebrate it? Because